Have you ever thought that maybe the reason you're hard stuck is because of your aim? Believe us when we say, yeah, a good portion of the time when we see clients hard stuck, it's because of their game sense and positioning and not their aim. But a large majority of our clients' woes could simply be solved by improving upon the most basic fundamental mechanic: their aim. Have you ever watched a professional player and thought to yourself, wow, it looks like he's barely even using his mouse while aiming? Well, that's because a majority of the time, these pro players aren't actually correcting all that much, due to the fact that they have a very strong pre-aim. Pre-aiming is easily one of the most fundamentally important mechanics to master. It is easy to learn, easy to improve upon, but it's really hard to master. All professional players, and a majority of higher level Immortal 3 players, have mastered this skill perfectly. Trust us when we say pre-aiming can be picked up and improved consistently at any level of gameplay, and it'll drastically improve your level of aim. Let's first take a look at some examples of poor pre-aiming, followed by examples of good pre-aiming. You can see here this player, we'll call him Frank. Swings from ropes to peak market on split, only to realize his crosshair is a few inches from where his opponent is standing. His opponent's standing in the standard area, which people will peek from market to ropes. Since our friend Frank swung and was off from the standard angle, in turn he panicked slightly and had to adjust his crosshair to where the enemy was standing, therefore causing him to lose nearly a whole second and adjust, losing him the gunfight. Let's take a look into how Frank easily could have played this differently. Frank has gathered the info from his feeding rays that an enemy's posted mid with a rifle, and that it would probably be wise to peek in order to rebalance the man advantage. From here, Frank does a genius maneuver that'll win him the gunfight. He aims at the common angle and market that's generally where enemy players will hold ropes from, swings in promptly in order to get the trade for his team. Frank won this fight due to proper timing and good pre-aiming hygiene. And yeah, it really is that simple, but it's a technique that, while it's talked about, it's highly neglected by players that are looking to improve. Pre-aiming's not necessarily something you practice in tandem with your regular aim training, but it is something that can be improved upon if you know how to go about it. This goes hand in hand with proper crosshair placement, which we don't really dive into as we have plenty of other videos covering that topic. Improving pre-aiming is a pretty easy task. What it boils down to mainly is general awareness of your crosshair and understanding what you did wrong in an aim duel in which your crosshair was improperly trained before swinging. When you swing an angle, any angle, always attempt to pre-aim where you think an enemy might be. If you have no info, swing the common angles first before fully exposing yourself right out in the open. Do this consistently. Pre-aiming is one of those skills that just kind of develops over time. Now, the reason this is the first point of our video is to help everyone understand that while it is a simple concept, there must be a conscious effort to improve and pay attention to pre-aiming in order to improve at a faster rate. Good crosshair placement in tandem with solid pre-aiming and core mechanic fundamentals of aiming will make you an extremely solid aimer. It's just understanding that aiming is multiple main pillars, like flicking, tracking, crosshair placement, pre-aiming, followed by other categories of aiming that, once mastered, really help you round out your kit and make you more consistent at aiming. Learning to take gunfights effectively with your pre-aim and crosshair placement is by far the most important part of improving at Valorant. At the end of the day, even if you make all the correct decisions up until the gunfight, if you end up missing your shots, you will lose. If you're new to the game or just struggling with your aim recently, we've got just the thing to bring your aim up to a competitive level and start taking over your matches. We recently produced an interactive hour-long masterclass on aim, complete with everything you need to know about becoming an aim god in Valorant. Combine that with everything else on the site, as well as the one-on-one coaching we do for site subscribers over in Discord, we guarantee we'll get you climbing in no time. In fact, our guarantee is so strong, we'll give you your money back if we can't help you climb. This means there's literally no risk, which is something other services just can't offer you. Use the link in the description below for a discount, and we'll see you there. Moving on to our second tip. This brings us to micro-flicking, which is a very important mechanic of aiming in Valorant. This is secondary to pre-aiming in a lot of instances, and you'll lose a lot of fair fights due to your micro-flicking being off. Before we start on how to improve this skill, let's talk about why you should work on it and what exactly it is. The reason micro-flicking is important is because it goes hand in hand with pre-aiming. When you swing an angle after pre-aiming but you're slightly off where you should be, what's your first thing you do instinctively? You adjust. You quickly adjust your aim to attempt to match your crosshair up with the opponent's head. The issue here is players with poor micro-flicking tend to panic since they're making a rapid adjustment, and in turn they usually over-flick or under-flick, and both of these are equally bad, and they usually make you panic even further and lose the gunfight. Professional players have turned micro-flicking into one of their most basic fundamentals of play. Micro-flicking should feel natural, and you should be comfortable making those quick adjustments to the head. With practice, you should be able to become fairly consistent with it over the course of a few training sessions. But how do I get good at micro-flicks? So micro-flick improvement is one of the simplest types of aim training that you can perform, and the muscle memory, once you learn it, it generally sticks to an extent. First off, you're going to want to load up the practice range. This is where a lot of the training from today will take place. Okay, once you're here in the practice range, you can start by loading up static bots to start your training. From here, you need to put your crosshair at head level, then offset it from a bot's head from varying degrees, but make it sure to keep it somewhat close. From this position, make a clear and concise correction to the head of the bot. Once you make the correction, shoot. Take this training very slow, and after each kill, take a mental note of how far off you were from the bot. Did you overflick? Did you underflick? Are you consistently doing one of these two? If so, understand which areas of microflicking you're weak in. I've personally been playing FPS games for 12 years, and I understand that aiming to the right is particularly weaker than my left side, so I always take a bit of extra care in polishing that side of my aim competence. Do this for about 100 kills. It shouldn't take too long. If you want to tone it down, do it for around 50. This is something you should work into your daily routine, and once you get more used to flicking these targets in a small path, it should start to feel very natural. One of the biggest tips we can give you today on the topic of microflicking is if you're consistently over or under flicking for at least 2 weeks of doing this routine, play around with your sensitivity. If you're consistently falling short of hitting the flick, raise your sensitivity slightly until you're able to flick a little more consistently. Over flicking and ending up miles away from your opponent's head, lower your sensitivity. It's all very simple, but a lot of players tend to fail to see how important microflicking truly is in making you more consistent and well-rounded. A little reminder to everyone watching, there are multiple fundamental factors that go into how good of an aimer you are. It's simple, but not as simple as monkey point click. You can even make your own routine based off your own personal weak areas in aiming, which we recommend doing as opposed to following an already created aim routine. It allows you to tailor it specifically to your weak areas. Tracking. Where to begin? Tracking is a staple name in the aiming community, and tracking is actually important contrary to popular belief in the Valorant scene. People tend to think that tracking is only useful in games like Overwatch, due to the fast-paced action and characters most noted for tracking needing the mechanics so heavily, like Tracer. The issue is, tracking is actually pretty important, and we're gonna tell you why. Tracking's heavily utilized in lots of specific scenarios in Valorant. One of the easiest ways to think of tracking is picture a jet mid-updraft throwing knives at you while you panic and try to follow her with your crosshair, only to watch your crosshair crudely follow and miss half the shots, resulting in you losing the gunfight. This is just one example of where tracking can be the key to winning a gunfight, and we see it all the time. Players excel at every aspect of aiming, but their tracking is pretty weak due to the fact that they don't train it. Learning how to efficiently track is like a glue that holds other forms of mechanical skill together. It's just as important as every other aiming mechanic that's spoken about. Not only can tracking help you win gunfights in Valorant more consistently, it can also help you feel more confident when taking gunfights. And when your aim is rarely to blame for losing a gunfight, it really helps you dial in on the reasons you died in certain scenarios. So we've established why tracking is so important. Now let's talk about why and how to train, and the ease of training this skill. This skill is very teachable and very in tune with muscle memory, so once you learn how to do this, you'll have 3 of the most important aiming mechanics improving at a consistent rate, making you that much better and helping you push through those plateaus you might find yourself meeting down the road in your Valorant journey. In the practice range, once again, you're going to want to load up the static bots. Don't worry, we'll move on to moving bots in the second portion of the training. Loosen up your wrist and your hand and aim at the bot's head. From this position, you're going to move left to right slowly, all while keeping your crosshair trained on the bot's head. Do this for roughly 15 to 20 seconds and then take a break. Once you break for a few seconds, move on to the next bot, rinse repeat for at most like 25 bots. And it's that simple. Once you get fairly proficient in this area, try moving on to moving bots. This will make it a bit more difficult to stay on target, but it's gonna help your progression. This portion of any routine should generally be done at the start of your aiming routine, as it loosens your wrist and your hand up and all around just warms up your aim. If you notice your crosshair stuttering a bit, try loosening your grip. Another thing to note, this can also help you determine if you need to raise or lower your sensitivity. If you're having trouble keeping up with the bot's head, try raising your sensitivity or lowering your sensitivity. Strafe burst, strafe tap, counter strafing. Moving on. Counter strafing, or AD tapping, it's an amazing tool. It enables those that are fairly proficient in gunplay and aim mechanics to really shine when they master it. Fortunately for us, Valorant players don't necessarily need to practice this skill. And the reason counter strafing is so important in games like Counter-Strike, it's that tapping the opposing movement key that you're using almost instantly halts your momentum, instantly boosting your accuracy when you correct your movement. In Valorant, simply stopping is about the same speed as if you were to press the opposite movement key. For example, holding D and pressing A and then shooting. Even though this mechanic might not be all that important in Valorant, not moving while shooting, while it does sound a little basic, can be a little more in-depth than people tend to notice. In Valorant, you move a lot, sometimes without realizing it. When you're dialed into a match, you do many things while you're immersed and focused into the gameplay that you're probably gonna miss. Moving and shooting is a prime example of something people tend to overlook due to how simple it is. I notice it a lot in Immortal players that I watch and coach. There are countless times players will be moving, think that they stop, shoot, and their bullets are completely off. And yeah, sometimes it can happen due to RNG that Riot decided would be a great idea to implement, but more often than not, it boils down to players not understanding when exactly they're completely at a full stop. It's so insanely simple, but it's so overlooked. This is more of something to just be consciously thinking about after you die. Was I really not moving there? It's a good question to ask yourself after a lost gunfight. There are ways to learn when you're at a full stop, and we definitely recommend everybody, no matter their level, at least try this out so they can understand their own movement at a more intimate level. When you combine the 3 previous tips with recognition of your own movement speed, you're going to be swinging and tapping people in no time. In Valorant, a lot of reasons you're losing gunfights and a lot of reasons your aim might feel entirely off is because you're panicking mid-gunfight. This one right here. Hands down, one of the biggest flaws in Valorant players. They see players like Tens going absolutely ballistic, aiming and flicking to everything possible, and they want to replicate that. I can promise you, just slow down, take your time, just breathe, please. One important thing to remember whenever you're playing Valorant, fights are genuinely a lot longer than you perceive them to be. Some fights even last up to a few seconds. You have that time to be a little bit more precise before you take your shot. Take this for example. This player misses a few bursts, immediately panics, and drops into a spray, making his opponent calmly take his time and shoot him while he's crouched. Don't be like this guy. Take your time in gunfights. Don't take too long, but remember, you usually have a decent amount of time to adjust your aim and hit your shots. If you pair this with the other fundamentals, especially tracking, you're going to be on your way to mastering calm aiming, which is way more consistent than rapid aiming. I notice personally when I'm in a bad mental state during gameplay, this is the first thing to go out. It's my aiming confidence. Even when my aim isn't really at fault. Once I start to panic during a fight, even subconsciously, it's just downhill from there. So take it from us at SkillCapped. Be calm while aiming and apply the principles we're teaching and you will steadily improve. This is a big one. Practicing properly, not overtraining. It's actually a pretty important thing to do while playing Valorant. There are ways to improve at the game that are much faster than just playing. We'll go over it soon, but first, we have to address the importance of burnout and slump prevention. Let's talk about aim practice for a second. Aim practice is without a doubt extremely important if you want to play the game at a professional level. Without aim practice, you will never see your full potential as a player. Also, try to understand, you should focus on certain aspects of aim training. For instance, we previously talked about how players are lacking certain aspects of their aim prowess, such as amazing tracking but poor flicking, or good flicking but bad pre-aiming. Lacking in any one of these areas will make itself apparent if you neglect training a certain aspect, so make sure your routine is curated specifically for what you recognize yourself to be personally worse at. It'd be kinda silly to play deathmatch for 5 hours a day and expect to get way better at Valorant. Sure, you'll see some improvement, but we're here to teach you how to work smarter, not harder. Every single week you practice your aim, curate your routine specifically to focus on one area of your aim. Take for example, you're playing and you notice everything aim-wise feels great, but you can't help but notice your micro adjustments and flicks just aren't hitting at all. For the next week while you're aim training, you should really hone in on the practice you're putting into your flick shots. Take roughly 30 minutes to an hour to do a standard aim routine, but do more flick practice than you normally would in a standard routine. This is going to ensure you recognize your flaws and you hammer them out right when you notice them, ensuring aim that is quite to a large extent balanced in all aspects. We also understand that people just want to play the game, and that's entirely okay. If you don't really care to take your gameplay to the next level or to do all these specific aim training methods in order to really dial in your aim, consciously make an effort to improve upon other areas while you're playing. You'll be able to play the game still, but you'll be improving at a faster rate because you're focused on what you're doing, why you're doing it, and how you could be doing it better. If you aren't going to take the steps to aim train, but you want to get better, it's easily one of the best ways we can recommend you improve. Now, a great example of overtraining and neglecting certain areas would be, take lifting for example. You're gonna notice 100% someone that only trains their upper body. You probably see memes about it all the time. Never skip leg day. It's a universal thing that everybody says. Never skip tracking day. That's our favorite quote over at SkillCapped. Burnouts are real in everything in life, and Valorant is no exception. Too much of one thing can always be bad. Too much of aim practice can definitely be bad. There are even ways to injure your wrist from too much pressure placed on your grip and turning your wrist in certain ways for too long, so go easy on the aim training. Make sure you give yourself days where you avoid training and you're just able to reset and absorb the training you completed over the previous days. Burnout will set you back way more than days you take off aim training, and it doesn't mean don't train on your aim, but don't do it every single day for 5 hours a day. That's definitely overkill. Have a goal in mind and practice with purpose. Alright, this is our final point. Once you've gotten all the other previous points hammered down, you should have no issues becoming an aim gremlin, haunting the Valorant ranked experience and anyone that dares touch Valorant ranked. But this doesn't mean you're the best player to touch the game. This brings us to overconfidence. Yeah, overconfidence can be good, but it can also be quite the hindrance to yourself and your team. Just because you're good at aiming now doesn't mean you can swing anyone and win any fight you take. Remember the foundational topics, how a lot of these work together and make one large aiming unit? Well, now you have to put that aiming unit together in tandem with your game sense. Think of yourself as a painter. The game sense is the paint, your aim is the paintbrush. Without the paint, all you have is a wooden stick. But given the proper colors and techniques to incorporate with your brush, you can paint a pretty cool picture for yourself. You need to use your aim wisely. Don't swing everything because you know you can out-aim everyone. Sure, it'll work sometimes, we're not going to deny that. Sometimes you're just having an insanely good game, but take a step back to all those times you got shut down for doing exactly that. Swinging while brimming with confidence. There are and there always will be people who are capable of shutting it down. So if you do decide to be extremely overconfident, just do it with your teammates' help. It is a team game after all. At this point, you should be on your way to rapidly improving in Valorant. Make sure you put all these tips together because it's gonna make your aim and even your playstyle all that more rounded. Understand that a lot of these points don't work super well without the others. So let's talk about preparing the swing. The idea is simple. As you're about to confront an angle, instead of immediately swinging out, you take a brief pause. During this pause, you position your crosshair right where you think your enemy is. Then, you make your move and shoot. See that tiny pause? That's your golden moment. It might feel like an eternity in the heat of a gunfight, but it's your chance to set up for success. Now, contrast that with this. No preparation, just swing and pray. Notice the curvy motion. It's reactive, and reactive plays often end up with you on the respawn screen. Many top tier players have this ingrained in their play. When they're sure a face-off is imminent, they prepare their swing, ensuring they have the upper hand from the get-go. This is one of the things we go into detail about in the Spider Method course on the SkillCapped site, where we break down how players like Shroud simplify the aiming process to make getting kills in Valorant stupid simple. There's actually a 6-step process that we break down on the site that'll walk you through exactly what you need to do to start fragging. All of this is backed by a rank up guarantee as well, so if you don't climb while actively using our service, you'll get your money back, no questions asked. We'll show you exactly how to cheat your mechanics, so you can skip the part where you look like this, and get to the part where you look like this. Check out SkillCapped using the link below. But now, let's get into the second reason that your aim is atrocious. You see that long corridor, that open space on Breeze, and your instinct is to engage from as far away as possible. Safe, right? Well, not exactly. Valorant has this thing called rifle inaccuracy. Close up, you might not notice it. Your bullets hit almost where you want them, but the further away your target is, the more RNG or random number generation is involved. Do you see the difference? At longer ranges, not only is your target tinier and trickier to hit, but the game's mechanics also add an element of unpredictability. And let's be real, on maps like Breeze, you might think it's all about those long shots, but it's not. It's a strategic game. You should be using your smokes, recons, drones, your entire utility belt to close that gap and ensure more consistent shots. And if you really have to take that long-range engagement, are you aiming down sights? If not, you should be. Beyond 30 meters, ADSing reduces the spread of your shots, making them more accurate. Yes, it does slow you down just a tad, but it will help you land your shot, and at this range, that's the most important part. Next time, remember, short and mid-range good, long range only with the right tools and mindset. Ever gone into a fight already expecting defeat? If so, you're likely familiar with the self-fulfilling prophecy. Look at our duelists. Jett, Reyna, Yoru, and, well, he's not a duelist really, but Chamber. Why do they often seem so fearless? It's because they have that escape button, that get out of jail free card, with abilities like Tailwind, Dismiss, and Gatecrash. But not all agents have that luxury. For Omen, a death means no more smokes. For Killjoy, her utility fades. There's weight to their deaths, and that can make them more tentative, more fearful. This fear isn't just mental, it manifests in gameplay. Hesitation, overthinking, ultimately going into duels expecting the worst. But here's a secret. Confidence is as crucial as any technique that we've discussed. Even if you're not a duelist, remind yourself, if you've been training, if you've been practicing, you've earned the right to trust your shots. Ask any pro about stage nerves. More often than not, they shrug it off. They simply state they'll do what they've always practiced. There's no magic, just trust in the work that they've put in. So the next time you face off against an opponent, channel that very same energy. Remember your hours of practice, your training, your preparation. Believe in yourself, because if you don't, who will? Ever wonder why your bullets seem to have a mind of their own? Well, chances are you're not standing still. See, there are typically two reasons players run and gun. One is sneakier than you might think. The first, panic. You spot an enemy, anxiety kicks in, and before you know it, you're strafing left and right, hoping your bullets find their mark. The fix, our earlier point on preparing your swing. Decide your approach before the engagement. We practice this with coaches. Before entering a deathmatch, decide how you'll take each fight. Burst strafe, tap, crouch spray, decide before the fight, and those panicked run and gun moments diminish, because you already made the decision 2 seconds before you did it. And this is why our Spider Method course is so valuable. It simplifies the aiming process for you, so you don't even need to think about aiming anymore. You just kinda do it. The second reason is a little more technical. Poor counter strafing. You might think you've nailed the technique, but the firing error graph tells a different story. This tool can be a revelation during VOD reviews. Even a slight mistiming on your counter strafe can send your bullet on a trip far from its intended target. Like all the way to Narnia. Now, don't get us wrong, you don't need to keep an eye on this graph during gameplay, but having it activated can be a goldmine during post-match analysis. Understand your strafe timing, make adjustments, and watch your shots land more consistently. So, the next time you're in the heat of a gunfight, plant those feet. Your accuracy and your KDA will thank you. Ever find yourself whiffing shots you know you should have landed? Well, there might be a simple reason for that. You're skipping your aim training early in your Valorant journey. Aim training is your best friend. It's like going to the gym for your aim muscles. Skipping it? Well, that's kinda like expecting abs without doing any sit-ups. Now, you might have heard your favorite pro shrug off aim training, but remember this, they've probably sunk a decade into FPS games, clocking in 8 to 10 hours a day on Valorant alone. Their world, it's a whole different ballgame. Yeah, they've built up their muscle memory, but what about you? If you're relatively new, there's no shortcut. Aim training is crucial. We can teach you fancy tactics, sure, but if you can't land a shot, tactics won't save the day. Each week, we have countless students sharing their game trackers. A surprising number, under 100 hours in game. Just to put things in perspective, I'm sitting at 3,000 hours, and Immortal players will give me a run for my money. Aim consistency comes with consistent practice. Aim to train for at least 30 minutes a day. Pair that with 2 to 10 match plays, and you're setting yourself up for success. If you really want to up your game, this isn't a suggestion, it's essential. If you're serious about improving and want a routine to follow, check out this video. Believe us when we say it is a game changer. If there's one takeaway from this guide, let it be that. Start aim training. The age-old debate. What is the best sensitivity? The most common answer, it's just preference. But let's dive in a bit deeper. Meet Forsaken, boasting one of the highest EDPIs in Valorant at 569.6. If you're running anything higher, you might want to rethink. We've coached hundreds of students, and we've seen EDPIs soaring into the thousands, and it's baffling. Now, if you're looking to improve, we can't stress enough. Recalibrate, dial it down. Valorant demands precision. Lower sensitivities excel here. Why? They allow for easier micro-adjustments. Muscle memory thrives on repetition, and larger, deliberate movements are simply more consistent and forgiving. With high sensitivities, a slight unintentional nudge can make your crosshair take a trip. But in Valorant, most engagements are right in front of you. You aren't spinning like a top. You aim, adjust slightly, and shoot. Now, entry fraggers might benefit from a slightly higher sensitivity, but even then, there's an upper limit, say 600 EDPI max, to ensure you're both swift and accurate. Running out of mouse space still? Innovate. In the old days, LAN players turned keyboards sideways, or opted for smaller ones, ensuring that their aim wasn't compromised. Remember, sensitivity might be subjective, but there's a fine line between preference and counterproductive. It's time to find your balance and stick within reasonable bounds. We've all been there, spotting an enemy and reflexively unloading bullets, hoping one will hit, but in this panic mode we often forget a fundamental rule. Aim before you shoot. Each subsequent shot becomes less accurate. Thus, the initial shot's precision, crucial. Don't let adrenaline dictate your actions. Slow down, process, take a breath, and aim. Encounters should not feel like a race against time. If you're positioning wisely and picking intelligent fights, you'll often find you have that split second more to aim. Enter the Miyagi method, an aim training approach where you track enemies in deathmatch, but you never fire. The objective? Build discipline and a deeper understanding of combat pacing. Now, we often hear frustrations about the notorious one tap. And yeah, while they do happen, it's not as omnipresent as some believe. Even in top tier games, mistakes and missed shots are plenty. It's a testament to the fact that you often have more time than you think. And the trick, just don't rush. Understand the rhythm of the game. Remember the golden rule. See, stop, shoot. It is a simple mantra, but one that can elevate your game. Keep your cool, aim right, and soon enough, you'll see yourself rising through the ranks. Oh yeah, and here's a bonus tip. If you're looking for a surefire way to improve your aim, you may actually want to consider playing Reyna for a bit. Reyna is an agent that is entirely reliant on gunplay. With other agents, you can cheat your way to high ranks by taking fights on targets, getting scanned through smokes, or full blind targets from your flashes. But with Reyna, you don't really have any of that to work with. It's you and your gun versus them. And for this reason, your mechanics need to be super sharp if you play Reyna. Otherwise, you're just going to be completely useless in the match. And luckily for you, if you're looking to master this aimbot of an agent, we've recently published a Master in Minutes course designed to teach you everything you need to know about playing Reyna in as short amount of time as possible. We'll tell you all the secrets Reyna player use to cheat the game, maximize their agent value so you can skip the part where you're dying like a bot and get to the part where you're dropping 30 a match.
Similar to how sensitivity is where your aim starts from, how your body is physically positioned has a direct relation to how you aim. How your computer and peripherals are set up may be helping or hurting your aim. A YouTube channel we recommend that dives into the more physical side of aiming is Ron Rambo Kim. He is a legendary Counter-Strike ex-pro who has decades of experience learning the ins and outs of FPS games. Many of his videos go over different topics such as your posture or how your setup should be for the best performance. To take a lesson from him, let's discuss the concept of finding your stance. Similar to how traditional sports harp on having the proper form to execute a specific action, we should try our best to mimic the proper form for good aim. Just as a disclaimer, similar to the sensitivity topic earlier, it's not impossible to have good aim with an unorthodox stance. There are plenty of examples of insane aimers with odd-looking stances. Ideally, you would want to follow these safe rules for your stance to see which points are comfortable with your body. We advocate that you try to get a desk and chair that is at the right height for your own body. In a perfect world, the optimal neutral position would be that your shoulders are relaxed, your elbow is bent 90 degrees, and your forearm is comfortably placed onto your desk. This neutral position gives us a great starting point to having consistency in our aim. Unfortunately, once we add the variables of our desk and chair height, this neutral position may be disrupted. If your chair is too low or if your table is too high, you may have to make readjustments to your body to compensate for this, such as shrugging your shoulders, turning your torso, or flaring your elbows out. If the chair is too high or the desk is too low, you may find yourself leaning forward or backwards to effectively lower your arm position. These struggles may affect your aim in negative ways, but more importantly, these changes in your stance may also cause pain or medical issues later on down the line. The goal with our stance is to have a reproducible position that allows us to have the most consistent performance possible. You may need to fine-tune your chair or desk height to find the perfect position for you to achieve this neutral stance. Just remember that how your feet are positioned can affect your stance as well. You may find yourself lowering your chair height to find your stance, but your legs might be cramped at an awkward angle, or maybe your chair is too high, causing your feet to hang, which does not let your feet be supported from the ground. An adjustable desk is a perfect solution to getting around this, but obviously not everyone has the money to just buy a standing desk whenever they want. The reality is you may not have the resources to achieve the textbook neutral stance, but trying your best to get as close as possible and being aware of how your body is positioned should be the main takeaway from this section. Take some time to really observe how your stance is and ask yourself these questions. Is this position reproducible? Is it healthy for the long term? And does it allow my body to have consistency with my aim? To continue with the topic of consistency, let's discuss warming up. Consistency comes from our ability to raise the floor level of our gameplay, causing us to have a decent expectation of our aim. I think we all have experienced the first game of the day phenomena. You queue up for ranked as soon as the game launches, and it feels like you're just unable to hit any shots at all. You're clearly missing shots that you know on any other day would be free. Having some form of warm-up before entering your first game drastically changes the shots you should be able to hit. If we look at traditional sports, it's almost unheard of that professional players or even amateur players start a match without warming up their body. In physical sports, this is commonly used to prevent injuries since your body moves much more fluidly when it's warmed up, which is still important even for warming up for video games. But the major reason why we warm up for Valorant is to make sure our muscle memory is ready to be placed into common aiming situations. Look at it this way. Do you want to gamble your ranked points on the very first couple of duels that you have for the day? Probably not. On top of this, much of the time spent in a ranked game is spent not even getting to shoot at enemies. Going into a lower risk environment where you have much more uptime in gunfights will help speed up the process in reaching a warmed up state. We encourage you to spend a bit of time in either the range or a deathmatch so you can remind your muscle memory how to shoot at targets in the way you want to. I know that many of you may feel like this is a bit annoying to do since sometimes you just want to hop into a ranked game as soon as possible, using excuses such as, I don't have enough time to warm up. I would reply to this sentiment by saying that focusing on the quality of your games rather than the quantity is how you will find more consistent performances. Let's frame it this way. If you spend 15 to 30 minutes warming up so that the floor level of your aim is a bit higher for the rest of your games, it's basically the same as spending roughly one game or even one half worth of time to raise the quality of the rest of the games later on. Here are some very basic but productive warm-ups that you can do in the range. First, start off by spawning all of the bots by shooting the practice box. Then slowly flick from one target's head to another while aiming for 100% accuracy. This will focus your muscle memory on the feeling of accurate flicks. As you feel more comfortable, speed up the flicking process while still maintaining 100% accuracy. As you repeat this process over and over, you should get to the point where you seamlessly transition your slow flicks into accurate but fast ones. Once your flicks feel comfortable, spend some time just moving around while shooting the bots. Get creative and use multiple shooting styles as you warm up. Tapping headshots, small bursts, and spray transfers are a couple of examples you can use. To finish up your warm-up, queue for a couple of death matches. This will help complete the warm-up routine by putting you in scenarios where your target can shoot back at you. I believe this is a worthy trade-off if your main focus is to improve the consistency of your aim. This extra layer of pressure helps fully cement your muscle memory to getting used to hitting shots in more stressful situations. The cornerstone to great aim is having proper crosshair placement. Before we dive deeper into this topic, we would like to let you know that we do have an entire video breaking down crosshair placement in great detail. If you're looking to have a much more in-depth breakdown of crosshair placement, check this video out before finishing this one. For this section, we will be mostly focusing on defensive crosshair placement, since we'll talk about how to use crosshair placement for peeking in a later segment. The two key elements when it comes to crosshair placement is first, the height of your crosshair, and second, the width between your crosshair and the edge of a wall. As most of you have heard time and time again, keep your crosshair at head level. This gives you the best opportunity at eliminating the target as quickly as possible and with as little readjustment needed. Headshots are the universal FPS mechanic that gives you the lowest amount of time needed to get a frag. At first, this might be a bit hard to gauge if you don't have much experience with head level crosshair placement. In situations like these, I would urge you to spend some time watching recorded footage of your own gameplay where you felt like your crosshair placement was vertically off. Take notice of where the head of your opponent was relative to the objects surrounding them. Use these objects as reference points to have some kind of reminder where head level is the next time you're in that position. You can even take it a step further and hop into a custom lobby and practice keeping your crosshair at head level relative to the reference point you gave yourself. As for the width distance of your crosshair, there's a bit more subjectivity on how wide you need to place your crosshair. This is due to some players having a bit quicker click reaction time due to circumstances such as genetics, physical condition, and experience in holding that individual angle. But there are some rules to follow that can help with determining this. The depth at which an enemy may peek at will change how wide you should place your crosshair. If an enemy is peeking from very close to the corner, they will be a bigger target and move much faster from your perspective. In cases like these, place your crosshair a bit wider to compensate for their speed. The opposite of this is true as well, since they will move slower from your perspective if they peek further away from the corner, resulting in you placing your crosshair a bit tighter to the wall. These rules may not apply though if the opponent chooses to use different types of peeks, such as jiggle peeks or wide peeks, so keep these variables in mind. Many believe that aim is just how well you can control your mouse, but an underrated mechanic with aim is using your movement to move your crosshair rather than solely using your mouse hand to make adjustments. This is most apparent when using the slice the pie peeking technique that we went over in the crosshair placement video we mentioned earlier. For those of you who are unfamiliar, slicing the pie is basically clearing multiple angles by slicing them up into manageable chunks. This is mostly used when you need to check the common angles on a bomb site. Being efficient with your peeks during this technique requires you to use your strafes to move your crosshair so that as soon as you are done moving, your crosshair is placed exactly where it needs to be without having to move your mouse again. You can extrapolate this idea of using movement to aim in many other scenarios as well. A common situation that occurs is when you're in a gunfight and the enemy crouches in hopes to throw off your crosshair placement. But an easy solution to this is to mirror their crouch, which results in your crosshair moving down with you. This can give you an easy headshot since your own crouch will move your crosshair down to match their crouch. This concept of using your movement to mirror your opponent's movement to help aim can be used with strafing as well. This is also a contributing factor to why I'm not a huge fan of using third-party aim trainers. They do help with gaining a bit more control over your mouse hand, but being able to practice how your movement affects your aim is a huge part of learning how to hit your targets. This is only really replicable by practicing within the game itself. Hopefully, this is a lesson to you that you shouldn't slack on practicing your movement even if you're looking to improve your aim mostly. A bad habit that many players will face is committing to a spray way too early. This is even more clear with a game like Valorant since the spray patterns in this game past a certain point are heavily influenced by sheer luck. If we break down how the spray pattern works, it starts with having the most accuracy in the first shot. Then progressively the bullets will move up and off the crosshair until it reaches the end of the spray where it's moving left and right in a random order. The key factor we want to concentrate on is the first bullet. The first shot is the highest accuracy possible with close to no randomness associated with it. If we look at it from an objective point of view, the first shot has the highest chance of success since it has the least amount of randomness to it. Because of this, we should treat our first shot with much more care before we fire. Taking our time to line up a headshot if possible will make finding kills much easier. I know that a lot of you will feel like taking this brief moment to line up the shot might mean life or death, which is honestly true, but you have to remember that it's quite likely that the enemy may not instantly kill you if they don't land a headshot immediately. Taking a bit of damage as a trade to buy yourself some time to confirm the headshot is almost always worth it. This is especially evident with the Vandal as it's a one headshot kill at all ranges. It's hard to rely on the aim you practiced on if you're spraying all the time, which is unreliable due to the randomness. Generally, tapping and bursting allow you to rely much more on consistent factors such as your aim and movement to find kills rather than getting good luck on your spray pattern. Keep this in mind if you find yourself spraying in most of your duels. When we think of aim, an image of someone hitting the nastiest flick possible usually comes into mind. Flicks are probably the most overrated aspect of aim since they do look the flashiest to the common eye, but if a flick is needed to secure a kill, it's likely there were other elements that could have been improved on in order to make the shot not have to need one. Either way, flicking is an integral part of aim that we shouldn't disregard entirely. The slow flicking warm-up exercise from earlier is a fantastic way to practice your flicks, but I do want to show another exercise that works on more than just flicking alone. Enter the firing range. Press F3 and select the medium difficulty under the speed column. Grab yourself a Vandal, then shoot the start box. Your goal is to keep moving at all times if possible while counter-strafing and tapping for only headshots. Between every kill, keep resetting your crosshair to the center of the firing range. This practice drill will help work on your ability to acquire a target in your field of view, flicking onto their head while using movement, counter-strafing so that your shots are accurate, and your micro-adjustment flicks in case you do miss your initial shot. Similar to compound exercises for when you're working out, it trains multiple areas required for having crispy flicks. So if you ever feel like you need to work on cleaning up your point-and-click aim, try this workout. Aim is just a culmination of many different moving parts that are in and out of the game. Being able to dissect which areas need work and creating a focused method to bettering it is how you find more consistency with your mechanical improvement.
Alright, let's break down the first reason why your aim might feel off. You're overcomplicating the aiming process. It's a trap that many players fall into. They're getting tangled up in the complexities of aiming techniques. Yes, advanced techniques like counter-strafing and dead zoning have their place, but they're not always necessary. They're tools in your arsenal, meant to be used situationally, not compulsively. Imagine you're on Icebox and you spot an enemy in mid. They haven't seen you yet, or you're quickly trying to trade out a teammate. This is where the principle of see, stop, shoot shines. You don't need to counter-strafe, dead zone, or crouch spray. Your focus should be razor sharp. Just see the enemy, stop your movement, and take the shot. It's that straightforward. Many players get caught up in the notion that they need to always be moving to avoid getting shot at. But if the enemy is not aiming at you, there's no risk of you dying. In reality, adding too many actions can distract you from the most critical part of aiming, aligning your crosshair with the opponent's head and clicking. When the target isn't looking at you or when a quick reaction is needed, simplicity is your best friend. Think of it this way, the less that you worry about integrating all of these additional actions into every shot, the more bandwidth that you can have to focus on what truly matters, moving your crosshair accurately and firing. It's about minimizing the variables in play. By reducing the complexities, especially in situations where speed and precision are key, you allow yourself to concentrate solely on aiming and shooting. Remember that Valorant is a game of milliseconds. By streamlining your process to see, stop, shoot, you're not only making your aim more efficient, but you are also making it more effective. Keep it simple, focus on the fundamentals, and watch as your aim improves significantly. I know what a lot of you are thinking though. Easier said than done. We all know that aiming is as easy as putting your crosshair on the opponent's head and clicking, but why is it so difficult to actually do that in game? Well, this is exactly what we cover in our new course over at SkillCapped, where we teach you our own unique aiming method to instantly start fragging in your matches. The aim method was made by analyzing top tier players in the game such as Shroud, Demon 1, and TenZ, and breaking down the things that they do to simplify the aiming process so that they are able to whiff less and carry more matches. In just 6 simple steps, we'll completely transform how you aim or your money back. That's right, you heard me. We offer a 5-division rank up guarantee, meaning that if you don't climb while actively using our service, then you don't pay. That's just our promise to you that our service works, and if it doesn't work, you shouldn't pay. Check it out using our discount link in the description below, and other than that, let's get into the next massive mistake that destroys players' aim. You're always playing as the defender. In FPS games, there's a crucial concept known as peeker's advantage. This refers to the slight edge a player who actively peeks or swings around an angle has over somebody passively holding that angle. Traditionally, when people refer to peeker's advantage, they're talking about a ping difference. But even as hardware and network speed has improved, reducing this ping discrepancy, the advantage for the aggressor remains significant. The reason is simple. When you're the one peeking, you're mentally prepared for the encounter. You even have the option to pre-fire if you so choose, especially if you're expecting somebody in a common spot. This leaves the defender with barely any time to react. It's like being in bind, knowing that the enemy is likely holding long. If you swing them, you're in control. You dictate the engagement. But how do you counter this if you find yourself on the defensive side? The answer lies in jiggle peeking. Jiggle peeking allows you to stay mobile while making yourself a harder target to hit. It also gives you the opportunity to catch your opponent off guard. Imagine you're holding from dice on a Sense A site. Instead of staying static, you jiggle peek. Your opponent swings expecting you to be in that fixed spot, but you're not there. They move on to clear other angles, and that's when you peek them. By jiggling, you not only gather information, but also because you're the one peeking now, you become the aggressor. This method puts you in a position where you're ready to react and take the fight to them. It's about turning the tables, shifting from being the predictable defender to a less predictable aggressor. In summary, don't let the game's dynamics always force you into a passive role. Challenge yourself to mix up your playstyle, jiggle peek, gather information, and be ready to take the initiative. By doing this, you'll find that your aim along with your overall gameplay will improve as you become more adaptable and proactive in every match. Tip number 4 is all about the art of dead zoning. Many players, including myself during my climb from Iron to Immortal, often overlook the significance of perfecting their dead zoning technique. It's not just about being good enough at dead zoning, it's about mastering it to the point where it becomes second nature. So how do you know if your dead zoning is up to par? A simple test is to head into the range and try consistently hitting the same spot while strafing back and forth. If you find that your shots are scattered or not hitting their mark, it's a clear sign that your dead zoning needs work. One effective way to practice this is to use the spawn 100 bots feature in the range. First, position yourself in the corner by this metal beam. Your goal here isn't to hit the bots necessarily, it's to focus on maintaining a straight shot while you're strafing and dead zoning. As you strafe back and forth around the pillar, fire a single bullet each time that you change directions, aiming for the bot's head. The bullet should travel straight regardless of where you are aiming. Don't stress too much about hitting the bots initially. Concentrate on the straightness and consistency of your shots. This exercise should be part of your warm-up routine, and try to do it for about 300 bots before each play session. Over time, you'll notice a significant improvement to your dead zoning ability. Once you feel more comfortable in your dead zoning while strafing, revisit the wall test in the range. Attempt to land all of your shots in the same spot again. It might be challenging at first, but with dedication and consistent practice using this routine, you'll get there eventually. Dead zoning, especially for players stuck in ranks like gold, can be a game changer. While we mentioned in tip number 1, many players worry too much about dead zoning when nobody is aiming at them, when the targets are aiming at you, you need to know how to dead zone. This skill not only improves your aim, but also enhances your overall movement and shooting mechanics. Stick with your routine and you'll see how quickly your accuracy and confidence in gunfights increases. Let's move on to reason number 5, which is the overutilization of ADS or aim down sights. It's a trend that I've frequently observed, especially in lower ranks. Players excessively using ADS even in situations where it's not beneficial, like running and gunning with a Spectre. This habit is surprisingly common even up to gold lobbies. For new players, my advice is straightforward. Avoid using ADS as much as possible. It might seem counterintuitive, especially if you come from other FPS games where ADS is crucial, but in Valorant, it's a different ballgame. The game's mechanics and gunplay are designed in such a way that hip firing is often more effective, especially in close to mid-range combat. The issue with overusing ADS in lower ranks is that it can become a crutch, hindering your ability to dead zone or spray effectively. That said, ADS does have its place in the game. Because it increases your accuracy, it can be useful in long-range engagements where precision is key and you're going for those one-tap headshots. However, when you're in low elo, it's just best to not use it at all, since it's more often incorrect to ADS than it is correct. In lower ranks, just focus on hipfire. Now for possibly the biggest reason your aim sucks, you just never use deathmatch. It's a scenario I encounter very frequently. Players lamenting about their poor aim, yet when I check their stats, there's next to 0 time spent in deathmatch. It's just like taking a test without studying. You're never going to be prepared for a real game if you don't DM. It's an essential mode for honing your aiming skills, and it should be a staple in your training regime. To put it into perspective, consider this. In a typical competitive match, you might be engaging with 30 different gunfights over the course of an hour. That's not a lot when you're looking to improve your aim. Now, contrast this with a deathmatch session, including the warm-up, you could easily find yourself in over 40 gunfights. The difference in the number of engagements is stark, and that's where the value in deathmatch lies. The key here is repetition and volume. Good aim is a skill that needs constant and focused practice. You simply can't get enough of that in regular competitive matches. This is why incorporating deathmatch or aim trainers into your practice routine is critical. These tools provide a concentrated environment where you can repeatedly work on your aim, reflexes, and shooting mechanics. If you're serious about improving your aim, you need to put in the work outside of competitive matches. Relying solely on comp games for aim practice is like training for a marathon, but only ever running when you're competing in the race. So if you find that your aim is not where you want it to be, and you haven't been dedicating time to deathmatch or aim training, it's time to start. Integrating these practices into your daily routine will make a notable difference in your aiming ability. Remember, consistent and focused practice is key, and deathmatch is one of the best ways to ensure your aim doesn't just improve, but becomes a formidable part of your skill set. Tip number 7 is crucial and often overlooked. You think way too much. Many players, particularly those who spend a lot of time watching guide videos, get deeply engrossed in the strategy aspects of Valorant. But here's a reality check. If you're below the Immortal rank, the emphasis should primarily be on honing your mechanics and not overthinking the strategy. If you're in gold and classify yourself as an IGL type player, this tip is specifically for you. At these levels, mastering your mechanical skills like aiming, movement, and reflexes is what truly opens the door to higher ranks and, subsequently, more strategic gameplay. Consider this, in professional teams, in-game leaders, or IGLs, known for the strategic prowess, often have lower individual performance stats. Why? Because focusing on strategy takes a toll on their mechanical play. If you're watching this video, you can't afford to be taking a hit to your mechanics. You already suck. And I mean that in the most loving way. Applying this to your games, if you find yourself constantly trying to micromanage your team, who might not even be listening half the time, you're not helping yourself. This micromanagement and this overemphasis on strategy at the cost of your personal play is a trap. You end up sacrificing your own performance, getting caught up in trying to play optimally or calling complex strats. Then you bottom frag in matches and feel worse about yourself, only hurting your confidence more. The key to climbing out of lower ranks and improving your gameplay is to focus on winning your individual gunfights and taking smart engagements. It's about simplifying your approach. Not every game needs to have a complex strategy. Sometimes it's just about pushing together and landing your trades. So if you find yourself bogged down by the strategic side of things, take a step back. Focus on your mechanics and make sure that you're winning those 1v1s, positioning yourself well, and playing to your strengths. As you climb higher and your mechanical skills solidify, you'll naturally be able to incorporate more strategy into your gameplay. But for now, just keep it simple. Focus on improving your fundamentals and watch as your game improves significantly. Tip number 8, and this is a big one. crosshair placement. You've probably heard it 1,000 times, but it bears repeating because of its immense importance. Now, crosshair placement is a vast topic with many nuances, and many players roll their eyes at the mention of it because it's been discussed so much. But there are countless amounts of little details that go into improving your crosshair placement. At the top level, what you want is for any time an enemy swings at angle, you don't even need to move your crosshair at all. All you have to do is click. There's thousands of little things you can do to help accomplish this that would take me far too long to cover in just this one video. I do go over all these intricacies though in our Aim God course over at the SkillCapped website. There's so much to unpack that it ends up being about an hour long. I could try to summarize it all briefly here, but it just wouldn't do it justice. If you're serious about improving this aspect of your gameplay, I highly recommend checking out the course. Here's why crosshair placement is paramount though. In Valorant, split-second reactions can make the difference between winning and losing a gunfight. If your crosshair is already positioned where it needs to be, you're eliminating the time that it takes to adjust mid-fight. This means that you're always a step ahead, always ready for the encounter. If you're not 100% prepared for the gunfight, the likelihood of losing it increases dramatically. In essence, crosshair placement is about efficiency and preparation. By consistently keeping your crosshair at head level and anticipating enemy positions, you're setting yourself up for success. It reduces the need for major aim adjustments, allowing you to focus on strategy and movement. Remember, in a game where milliseconds matter, having your crosshair in the right place at the right time can be the deciding factor in your success. So if you feel like this is an area where you need to improve, don't hesitate to delve into our Aim God course where we'll teach you all about it.